Hello viewers, welcome back to my channel Data Insights with Gaurav. This video is part of the YouTube series Pandas for Data Analysis. In this video, we'll talk about how can we work with categorical data. If you haven't watched my earlier videos, I encourage you to go and watch these videos, which will help you understand how can we load data to the data frame, how can we clean data by removing some columns, adding a few columns, and updating a few columns. So I'll leave the link to these videos in the I button at the top. Now let's talk about what are categorical data. So let's understand what are categorical variables in the first place. So categorical variables are basically variables from statistics, which usually take fixed number of values. So for example, gender, right? So it will have a fixed number of values. So when you want to save fixed number of values, that is when you will use categorical data type. So in pandas, categoricals is a pandas data type which corresponds to categorical variables in statistics. In contrast to statistical categorical variables, categorical data might have an order. For example, strongly agree versus agree. So strongly agree has a higher order than agree. So in pandas, you can actually specify that the categorical data is ordered by some means. We'll look at that when we do the demo. Now, values in the categorical data could either be in categories or it could be NaN. NaN is none. So you could not have any value that is behind this categories or NaN. So you cannot have anything other than that. All right. And when you specify the order, it is basically the order that you specify and not the lexical order. So we'll see in a moment how can we do that. Right? So when will you use this categorical data type? So it will be a string variable which consists of very few different values. And when the lexical order of a variable is not the same as your logical order. All right. So that's the theory around categorical data. Now let's look at the demo and try to understand how it works. So I've already have a data set which looks something like this. It has some order information here, correct? And it has the status column, which I intend to make it categorical because this column has few distinct values. For now, it has pending, shipped, and delivered. So these are the three distinct values that this column status has. So I intend to make this categorical. Now let's look at the info. So right now, when I look at the info and when I look at the status column here, it is of type, data type, object. What is object? We will discuss about this, that it is actually a generic data type in pandas to store any Python object. So right now, status is of data type object, but we intend to make it categorical. So let's see how to make it. All right. So as type is a method that helps you change the data type of a particular column. So here what I'm doing is, here I'm trying to infer the categories and the order automatically. So what I'm doing is I'm simply saying convert this status column to data type category. All right. I'm not specifying the order. I'm not specifying what categories does that column belong to. And I let pandas infer it automatically. So let's try to run this. So this is run, right? Let's look at the output. So now you can see that the data type is no longer object, but it is of data type category. The categories were inferred automatically. So you can see that it looked at the data set and said, okay, these are the three different categories in which that column belongs. So it is delivered, pending, and shipped. Right now it's D is, so because of the lexical order, it did D, then P, and then S. So these are the three categories that you have. And what about the order? So there is no specific order for now because we didn't specify. Pandas inferred it as unordered category, right? And internally, it saved the codes of these categories. So for pending, for delivered, it is at 0. So it is code 0 internally. Pending is internally 1 and shipped is internally 2. So all this metadata, how did we access that? So we use the .cat accessor, which is kind of another accessor. We already discussed about string accessors and date accessor in our earlier videos. So this is again a cat accessor, which is specifically meant for category data, and you can access the metadata around that. So when you say .cat .categories, it helps you know what are the categories in which this categorical data type column belongs to. When you look at the ordered. So it helps you know whether that particular category is ordered or not. And when you look at dot codes, it helps you know what are the internal codes for each of the categories that this particular categorical data type belongs to. All right. So these are the metadata around this. Now it was inferred automatically. Now let's say I want to give it explicitly, right? So it has already been defined. And now what I can do is I can use method from the cat accessor, which is set categories, which will help you define the new categories. So in this case, earlier I had delivered, pending, and shipped. What I'm doing is I'm adding another category in transit. So I'm saying that this status column, which is already a categorical variable, so that is why I can use .cat. And on that, I'm trying to set new categories. So now I'm saying the new categories are 4 categories now, right? And then I'm saying that because it was implicitly as unordered, I want to make it ordered. Let's say I want to say that pending is lesser than shipped, is lesser than in transit, and lesser than delivered. So this is the sequence in which the categories have a particular order in it, right? So I want to do that. So what I'll do is I can set the order explicitly by saying as ordered function. So let's try to do this. And let's try to see what the metadata is. So now again, the data type is still category, but now you can see that the categories are now pending, shipped, in transit, and delivered. So this is the same thing that I set in the earlier set categories function. So these are the new categories that you have. And now you can see that the categories are ordered. Why? Because I set this as ordered. So when I did it implicitly, it was false. Now it's true. And what are the codes? Now pending should have 0, which is the case. Shipped should have 1, which is the case here. In transit, so I don't have in transit data for now in my data frame. So that is why it's 2, but it's not showing it here. And delivered, it's 3. Correct? So the internal codes for these categories are 0, 1, 2, and 3. All right. So now let's say I don't want to do that. I want to do all these 3 things, setting up categories and giving an order at one go. How can I do that? So let's make this back to object, correct? So I'm making this back to object. And how can I do that? So when I pass this function, when I call this function as type, I can pass the data type not as a category string literal, but I can create a categorical D type where I can specify the categories that I want to and the order as well. So this will all those things that I did in 3 steps now can be done in one single step, right? So let's try to see it again. So now what has happened is, if I look at the metadata, so I can see that it is category. Now, because I set this as one step, so it is again same step, true, and the codes are similarly 0, 1, 2, 3. But what has happened is now, instead of 3 different steps before, I'm now doing it in one step. All right. So you can do whatever is your wish when you do data analysis, right? So now with this in mind that we have this column as category data type, let's see what else can we do with these, right? So tomorrow, let's say you want to reorder the categories. Yesterday it was that we had this pending, had lesser precedence than shipped, then in transit, and then delivered. Now I want to tweak this around. I want to say that my delivered has lesser precedence than in transit, and so on and so forth. So how can I do that? So what I can do is I can call a function called reorder categories. Now again, this is available in the cat accessor. So I can say reorder categories and I can give my new categories. So what will this do? This will not set the new categories. It will only reorder the existing categories. So here I had 4 categories. I'm just reordering them. I'm saying delivered has higher precedence than sorry. So it has lesser precedence than in transit, then shipped, then this. So it will be 0, 1, 2, and 3. All right. So let's try to run this. And let's try to look at the metadata again. So now the area of interest is this, correct? So now we said delivered at the bottom, then in transit and pending at the top. So it is delivered at the bottom. Let's see, look at the codes here. You can see delivered has 0. So which means it is at the bottom of the precedence hierarchy, correct? So that is how you can use reordered categories to reorder the existing categories if you want to. Now, let's say I want to rename a few categories, right? So how can I do it? So again, I can use a function called rename categories where I can give new name to the existing categories. So here it was sentence case. I just made it to lower cases. So here I'll say new category is equal to, now this delivered will go to lowercase delivered, this in transit will go to lowercase in transit, and so on and so forth. So I can rename existing categories to whatever new categories of my choice by using the method called rename categories under the cat accessor. Let's try to run this and let's look at the metadata again. So now you can see that the categories have now changed, right? So they have been renamed by using the rename categories method. All right. So now let's move on. Now let's say I want to add new categories to the existing list. All right. So how can I do it? So what I can do, I can call the add categories method, which will take in the new categories to be added. So let's say I want to add a new category called discarded. So when I run this particular method and I run it, and let's look at the metadata again. So I can see that a new category has got added here at the end, which is discarded. Correct. So that's the that is how you add new categories to the existing category set. Then let's say I want to remove the discarded category again that I just added. So how can I do it? I can again call the remove categories method again under cat accessor, and I can just pass the removal, and I can just run this. Now let's try to look at the metadata. So now you can see that the discarded is gone. So calling this remove categories will help you remove a category from the categories metadata. Now there could be requirements where you would say that I don't know what to discard or what to remove, but I know that I want to get rid of all the unused categories. So what Pandas has done, they have given you a function called remove unused categories that will help you remove all the unused categories from the data set. So here, if you see, in transit is something that I have added, but it is not there in the data. So this is an unused category in my data set. So when I call this function, it should get rid of this in transit category. Let's see if that happens. Looking at the metadata, you can see that it is gone. Why? Because in transit was not used in my data set. So it removed the unused categories here. And let's say I want to set it to new categories again. So what will happen? Now a new category set will be introduced, but what happens to the earlier data? Correct? So what happens to the earlier data? Let's see. So my earlier data has pending, shipped, delivered, right? 3 different categories, but I'm setting it to cat1, cat2, cat3, cat4 of my choice. And let's look at the metadata again. Now you can see that the data is gone to NaN. So remember, we talked about that the data in the category column should either be in the categories or NaN, which is none, correct? So because the data in the category column did not belong to these new categories, the data in the data frame went down to NaN, right? So the categorical data type, the data within that column should always be either in the categories or in the NaN, right? So either of the two. You cannot have different categories and different data set, right? So that's all about the categorical data. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this content, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. It will help the YouTube algorithm to reach the wider audience and also encourage me to produce such quality content. Thank you for watching. See, until next time. Bye-bye.